A love that was never real, the beginning of her first love. Madeline Carter had always dreamed of a love that would last forever. She grew up believing that true love was pure, honest, and unbreakable. She had never been in love before, never had her heart stolen by whispered words, stolen glances, or gentle touches. Until she met Ryan Parker. Ryan was everything she had never known she wanted. Charming, confident, exciting. He had this way of looking at her that made her heart skip a beat. She fell for him fast and hard, and she believed, with every fibre of her being, that he felt the same way. But Ryan was not the man she thought he was, because Ryan didn't fall in love. He hunted, and Madeline, she was just his latest prey, the man behind the mask. Ryan Parker was a master manipulator. To the outside world, he was the perfect boyfriend. Caring, attentive, passionate. But in reality, love was his business. He had done this dozens of times before. Find a girl, make her fall in love, make her trust him. Then, slowly, carefully, skillfully, he took everything from them. Money, time, their hearts. And when he had drained them of everything they had to give, he left. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just another broken girl left behind. And Madeline? She was his next target. The perfect illusion. Ryan played his role flawlessly. Late-night phone calls, deep conversations about their future. Promises whispered in the dark. I've never loved anyone like I love you, Maddie. You're the only one who understands me. We'll be together forever. Madeline believed every word. And when Ryan needed a little financial help, she didn't even hesitate. I just need to get back on my feet, babe. I promise I'll pay you back. So she gave. Because that's what love was about, right? Giving, supporting, trusting. She had no idea, she was just another girl on his list. The moment she asked for forever. Madeline thought their love was real. So one night, she did something brave. She looked Ryan in the eyes and asked the question she had been dreaming of. Ryan, do you ever think about marriage? His face froze for a split second. It was so quick that she almost missed it. Then his smile returned, charming as ever. Of course, babe. One day. But his voice didn't match his words. Something was off. And for the first time, Madeline felt something she had never felt before. Doubt. The lie that broke everything. The truth came 2 weeks later. Madeline had been so happy, so in love, that she ignored all the signs. Until the night she saw him. With another woman? They were at a bar across town, where he thought no one would see him. He wasn't just flirting. He was kissing her, holding her, and the worst part, he looked at that woman the same way he had looked at her. Like she was the only one. The confrontation. Madeline couldn't breathe. Her heart was racing, breaking, screaming. She stormed inside, her voice shaking. Ryan, who is she? Ryan barely looked bothered. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Madeline, don't be dramatic. Dramatic, he called her dramatic. I've given you everything, she shouted. I gave you my heart, my trust, my money, my dash. She couldn't even say the last part. Because it hurt too much. Ryan smirked. I never asked you to. Madeline staggered back, as if he had physically struck her. So it was all a lie? She whispered. Ryan stood up, stuffing his hands in his pockets. You want the truth? He leaned in close. I never loved you, Maddie. Her stomach dropped. I did this for the money. You were just far easy. The words hit her like a knife to the chest. Tears burned her eyes. You played me. He shrugged. I play a lot of girls. Then he grabbed his drink. You'll get over it, they always do. And with that, he walked away. Leaving her shattered. The aftermath. Madeline couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She had given him everything. Her heart, her body, her dreams, and he had thrown it away like it was nothing. The pain was unbearable. But the worst part? She still loved him. Even after everything, she still loved him. And that was the most painful thing of all. The days after he left, the days following Ryan's confession felt like drowning. Madeline stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped feeling like a person at all. How could she? She had spent months believing in a love that was never real. Every moment she replayed in her mind, every kiss, every whispered, "I love you," was a lie. She had given him her heart, her trust, herself, and he had tossed it all away without a second thought. Her friends tried to help. "He was never good for you, Maddie. You deserve better. One day, you will be glad he or me is gone." But none of their words mattered, because Ryan wasn't gone. Not from her mind, not from her heart, not from her soul. And that was the worst part. Even after knowing the truth, she still missed him. The lies, she told herself. At first, she told herself it was just a mistake, that maybe he had fallen in love with her somewhere along the way, that maybe he had meant it when he said forever. She wanted to believe that, because the alternative, that he had never loved her at all, that was too much to bear. So she held on to hope, even when it was killing her. The first time she saw him again. It had been 2 weeks since that night at the bar. 2 weeks since Ryan shattered her world. 2 weeks since she had forced herself to stay away, until the day she saw him again. She hadn't meant to. She had been walking home from class when she spotted him across the street. Ryan, laughing, smiling, holding another girl's hand. And just like that, the knife in her heart twisted deeper. She froze, unable to breathe. Because how? How was it so easy for him to move on? She was barely surviving, and he was already with someone else. As if she had never even existed, Ryan's gaze lifted, and their eyes met. For a split second, she thought she saw something in his expression. Regret? Guilt? Anything? But then he just smirked. And then he leaned in and kissed the girl right in front of her. Madeline felt her entire world collapse all over again. She turned and walked away, not because she wanted to, but because if she stayed a second longer, she would have broken down right there on the street. The fool. That night, Madeline cried herself to sleep. It wasn't the first time, but it was the first time she realized, Ryan Parker had never loved her, not even for a second. And that was a pain she wasn't sure she would ever recover from. She stopped going out. She ignored calls from friends. She let the days pass in a blur of nothingness. Because what was the point? If love wasn't real, what was she even living for? The night. Everything changed. It was a stormy evening when she heard the knock at her door. At first, she ignored it. She didn't care who it was. Didn't care about anything anymore. But then Maddie, open the door. Her heart stopped. Number, it couldn't be. She slowly got up, her hands trembling. She reached for the doorknob, hesitating, praying she was imagining this, but when she pulled it open, Ryan was standing there in the rain, soaked, breathless, and looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. Madeline's entire body locked up. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because after all the pain, after all the tears, after everything he had done to her, why was he here, and worse? Why did her heart still ache for him? The night he came back. Rain poured down, soaking Ryan's hair, dripping from his jacket. Madeline stood frozen in the doorway, her fingers tightening around the handle. She should slam the door. She should scream at him. She should tell him to never come back. But instead, she whispered, "Why are you here?" Ryan's gaze softened, his voice low and almost pleading. "Can I come in?" Madeline hesitated. She knew better, but her heart, the same heart that he had shattered, was still beating for him. So she stepped aside and let him in. The apology that meant nothing. Ryan stood in her apartment, dripping water onto the floor. His presence filled the room like a storm, one she had barely survived the first time. He ran a hand through his wet hair, his blue eyes locking onto hers. Maddie, I messed up. Her chest tightened. You did more than mess up, Ryan. She wanted to sound strong, unshaken, but her voice betrayed her. Ryan sighed, stepping closer. I did know what Tom'd mean for things to happen the way they did. Madeline laughed bitterly. Oh, really? So you didn't mean to play me? Didn't mean to take my money? Didn't mean to break my heart? Ryan clenched his jaw. I was scared. Madeline's hands curled into fists. Scared of what, Ryan? Of loving me? A silence stretched between them. For a split second, she thought she saw guilt flash across his face. But then he said the words that broke her all over again. Maddie, I never wanted love. Her stomach dropped. Then why are you here? She whispered. Ryan exhaled, stepping closer. Because I miss you. A love that refused to die. Madeline hated how much she wanted to believe him. She wanted to push him away, to tell him to leave and never come back. But when he reached for her arm, when his hands cupped her face the way they used to, her body didn't move. I made a mistake, Maddie, he murmured. But I can fix this. Let me fix this. Tears burned behind her eyes. She should say no. She should walk away. But instead she whispered, How? Ryan smiled, a slow, careful smile. Let's start over. Falling for the same lie. Madeline should have said no, but she didn't. Because love makes fools of us all. She let Ryan stay. She let him hold her again. She let herself believe that just maybe this time would be different. And for a while it was. Ryan was sweet, attentive, present. He called her every morning. He took her on dates. He looked at her like she was his entire world. And slowly, she let her walls down. She let herself believe. Until the night she asked him the one question that changed everything. If we're really starting over, what about marriage? Ryan's entire body stiffened, and just like before, Madeline finally saw the truth, because love shouldn't come with hesitation. And Ryan? Ryan had never changed. The return of his lies. Maddie, marriage is just a piece of paper. Her heart sank. No, Ryan, it's a promise. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Why do we need a paper to prove our love? She stared at him, feeling the same heartbreak she had felt before creeping in. Because I want to be your wife, Ryan. I want to be more than just a girl you love when it's convenient. Ryan's jaw tightened. Why do you always do this? Her breath caught. Do what? Push me. Expect more from me. Can't we just be happy? Madeline felt her world cracking again. You want me to be happy? With less? Ryan looked away. And that was her answer. The moment everything changed. Madeline felt sick. He had come back. Not because he loved her. Not because he wanted forever, but because he knew she was still weak for him. Because he knew he could lie his way back into her life. And like a fool, she had let him. Her hands trembled. Get out! Ryan's head snapped up. Maddie, I said, get out, Ryan. He took a step forward. Come on, don't do this again. Again? She whispered, tears burning in her eyes. You did this, Ryan. You came back. You made me believe. And now, I see the truth. Her voice broke. You never loved me, and you never will. Ryan's expression darkened. You're making a mistake, Maddie? But for the first time in months, she felt clear. She shook her head. No, Ryan. I made my mistake when I let you back in. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Then, without another word, he walked out. And this time, Madeline let him go, but he wasna. Tem done with her yet all. Madeline collapsed onto the couch, her chest aching. This time she had ended it. This time she had chosen herself. But Ryan wasn't used to losing. And in his mind, Madeline still belonged to him, even if it meant destroying her to keep her. And sooner, she would learn just how dangerous his love could be. The love that turned to obsession, a heart trying to heal. For the first time in months, Madeline Carter felt free. Ryan was gone, and this time, she had been the one to let go. She should have felt broken. She should have felt empty. But instead, she felt relief. She wasn't sure when it had happened, when the pain of losing him had been replaced with the relief of escaping him. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't his anymore. And for the first time, that felt like a good thing. She could finally breathe. Or at least she thought she could. Until the messages started. Until the calls wouldn't stop. Until she realized Ryan wasn't TM done with her yet. When letting go isn't an option. At first, it was just a few texts. Maddie, we need to talk. Why are you ignoring me? You're making a mistake. She didn't respond. Then the calls started. Unknown number. Again and again and again. Until her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Until she had to turn it off just to get a moment of peace. But Ryan wasn't the kind of man who took silence as an answer. And one night, when she walked out of her apartment to grab dinner, she saw him, waiting for her, leaning against his car, a slow, smug smile on his face, like he had all the time in the world, like he knew she couldn't escape him. Madeline's blood ran cold, the conversation that should never have happened. She wanted to turn around, to run. But Ryan was already moving toward her. Maddie, hey. His voice was casual, like he hadn't been harassing her for weeks. Ryan, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice tight. He smirked. I just wanted to see you. You won't answer my calls. Because we have nothing to talk about. His jaw clenched for half a second before he smiled again. Come on, don't be like that. Let's just talk. One last time. Madeline hesitated. She should have walked away. She should have ignored him, but she didn't, because part of her still wanted to believe he wasn't as bad as she feared. So, against her better judgment, she agreed, and that was her mistake. The trap she didn't see coming. They sat in his car, and for a moment it almost felt normal, like old times, like they weren't broken beyond repair. I miss you, Maddie, Ryan said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Madeline exhaled. Ryan, we've been through this. I can't... I know I messed up, he interrupted. I don't tempt to know how to be without you. She frowned. You seemed fine when you were with all those other girls. Ryan flinched, just barely. They weren't you. Her heart twisted, because she wanted to believe him. But she wouldn't fall for it again. Ryan, I think it's best if we both move on. Something in his eyes shifted. Move on, he echoed, his voice dangerously low. Yes, she said firmly. This isn't healthy for either of us. Ryan laughed, a dark, humorless laugh. You think you can just erase me? Madeline's stomach twisted. Ryan, you think you can just walk away after everything we've been through? Her pulse spiked, because suddenly Ryan wasn't Ryan anymore. This wasn't the charming boy she'd fallen for. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. The moment. She realized she wasn't safe. Madeline reached for the car door handle, but Ryan's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Maddie, don't do this. Her breath hitched. Ryan, let me go. He tightened his grip. I can't. I won't. You're mine. Fear clawed at her throat. She yanked her hand away, forcing herself to stay calm. Ryan, if you care about me, you'll let me go. His jaw clenched, and for one terrifying second she thought he wouldn't. But then slowly, he let her go. She pushed open the door, stepping out onto the sidewalk. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She turned to look at him one last time, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Ryan was watching her, not with sadness, not with regret, but with something far more terrifying: possession, because in his mind, she still belonged to him. And one way or another, he was going to make sure she never left him again. But this time, Madeline wouldn't be the victim. That night, Madeline sat alone in her apartment, her mind racing. For the first time, she realized, Ryan was never going to let her go. And if she wanted to survive this, she had only one option. She had to end it once and for all. Not just by ignoring his calls, not just by blocking his number, but by making sure Ryan Parker never had control over her again. And to do that, she had to beat him at his own game, because love had blinded her once. But this time, she saw everything clearly, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid anymore. The fear that never left? Madeline Carter had spent months trying to forget Ryan Parker, but Ryan, he had spent those same months making sure she never could. He was always there, lurking, waiting. She saw him across the street when she left her apartment. She saw his car parked outside her work. She saw his name pop up in blocked voicemails she never listened to. No threats, no violence. Just his presence, like a ghost haunting her every step. A silent message. "You can try to leave me, Maddie, but I'll always be here." And that was far more terrifying than any words he could have spoken. The warning she didn't expect. One afternoon, as she was leaving work, someone grabbed her arm. She spun around, heart racing, but it wasn't Ryan. It was a woman, a stranger, blonde hair, dark eyes, but there was something familiar about her. "You're Madeline, right?" the woman asked. Madeline hesitated. "Who are you?" The woman exhaled sharply, glancing around before leaning in. "You need to stay away from Ryan." Madeline's stomach twisted. "I am staying away from him." The woman shook her head. Not enough. Madeline's pulse spiked. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman hesitated. Then she said something that sent chills down Madeline's spine. "I was you once." The other victim. Madeline's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" The woman looked over her shoulder as if making sure no one was watching. "I was with Ryan before you, and before me there was someone else, and someone before her." Madeline felt her breath leave her lungs. She had known Ryan was a liar, a manipulator, but this was something else entirely. "He won't stop, Madeline," the woman continued. "He'll make you think you're free, but you're not. He doesn't let go. Ever." Madeline's hands curled into fists. "Why are you telling me this?" The woman exhaled. "Because I didn't listen when someone tried to warn me." Then she stepped back. "Get out while you still can." And with that, she walked away, leaving Madeline standing there, shaken, terrified, but more determined than ever. Because if Ryan Parker thought she was going to be just another one of his victims, he was wrong. The plan to escape. Madeline knew blocking his number wasn't enough. Knew ignoring him wouldn't make him stop. So she made a plan. A real one. She started looking for a new job, a new city, a way to disappear. She told herself that if she could just get away, truly away, he wouldn't follow. She started packing, started saving, started believing for the first time in months that she could have a life without him. Until the night she came home, and found her apartment door unlocked. The moment she knew she wasn't safe. Madeline froze in the doorway. She had locked the door. She was sure of it. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. Everything looked the same. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But then, she saw the envelope, sitting on the kitchen counter. No name, no stamp, just a single piece of paper inside. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, and when she saw the words written inside, her entire world tilted. "You can run, Maddie, but you'll never escape me." Her breath hitched, because she knew, Ryan had been here, and he wasn't done with her yet. The last time she would ever be afraid. Madeline refused to cry, refused to break, because this was war, and if Ryan thought she was going to spend the rest of her life running from him, he was wrong. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. She was going to end this, because love had once made her weak. But now it was going to make her stronger than ever. And for the first time, Madeline Carter wasn't afraid. She was ready. The fight for freedom. Fear turned into fire. Madeline Carter had spent months living in fear. Fear of Ryan, fear of what he would do next. Fear that no matter where she went, he would always find her. But the night she found his note in her apartment, something inside her snapped. She was done being scared, done looking over her shoulder, done being his victim. Ryan Parker had spent his whole life playing games, but now, Madeline was done playing, and this time, she was going to win. The first step, exposing the truth. Madeline knew Ryan's weakness. It wasn't violence. It wasn't anger. It was his reputation. Ryan didn't just use women. He used trust. He made people believe he was the perfect boyfriend, the charming lover, the man every girl wanted. But what would happen if everyone found out who he really was? So she made a plan to destroy him with the one thing he never thought she would use. The truth. The files that could ruin him. Madeline spent the next few days collecting everything. Every message, every voicemail, every bank transfer he had convinced her to send. Then, she reached out to the other women he had hurt. The blonde woman who had warned her. Her name was Isabel. And when Madeline told her what she was planning, she didn't hesitate. "I have proof too," Isabel said. "Let's end this." And together, they started building a case against Ryan Parker. A case that would show the world exactly who he was. A predator, a liar, a fraud. And soon, everyone would know. The warning that came too late. Madeline was careful. She made sure Ryan didn't know what she was doing. But Ryan always had his ways. And one night, as she was walking home, he appeared, right outside her building, leaning against his car, waiting. "Maddie," he said, smiling, "we need to talk." Madeline's heart pounded. She forced herself to stay calm. "There's nothing to talk about, Ryan." His smile didn't fade, but his eyes, they darkened. "You sure about that?" Her breath hitched, because Ryan wasn't just smiling. He was holding her phone, the phone she had been using to contact Isabel, the phone that had all their messages. And just like that, Madeline knew. He knew everything, the threat that changed everything. Ryan stepped closer, his grip tightening on her phone. "You've been busy, haven't you?" he murmured. Madeline's stomach twisted. "Give me my phone, Ryan." He tilted his head. "What's the rush, babe? Afraid I'll see something I don't like?" Her fingers curled into fists. "I'm not afraid of you." Ryan smirked. "That's cute." Then, in a single motion, he raised his arm and smashed her phone onto the pavement. Madeline gasped. The screen shattered. Everything she had collected drove gone. She stared at him, shaking with rage. "You think this is over?" she whispered. Ryan smiled. "Maddie, this will never be over." And then, just as calmly as he had come, he walked away, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her escape plan. But he had made a mistake. Madeline had lost her phone. But Ryan had just declared war. And she was ready to fight. Because he could break her things, but he would never break her again. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. When fear turns to fury. The moment she refused to break. Ryan Parker thought he had won. He thought that by destroying her phone, by erasing her evidence, by reminding her who was in control, he had silenced her. But what he didn't know? Madeline Carter had nothing left to lose, and that made her more dangerous than he had ever imagined. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. She wasn't going to let him win. This time, Ryan had pushed too far, and now, she was going to burn his entire world to the ground. Rebuilding the plan. Madeline spent the next few days regrouping. She got a new phone. She backed up every message, every bank statement, every call log from her old accounts. She reached out to Isabel. "He knows," she told her. Isabel's voice was sharp, determined. Then we need to move faster, Madeline agreed. They couldn't just expose Ryan to his victims. They had to expose him to the world, and this time, she wasn't going to make any mistakes. The first strike. Ryan was smart. He knew how to charm, how to manipulate, how to twist the truth. But he had one weakness, his reputation. And Madeline, she was about to destroy it. She started small. A private group chat for Ryan's exes. Dozens of messages started pouring in. Stories, receipts, bank transfers, evidence. Each one a piece of the puzzle, each one a nail in Ryan's coffin. And when they had enough, they went public. They didn't just post online. They went to reporters, to local news stations, to anyone who would listen. And in less than 24 hours, Ryan Parker's perfect world began to crumble. The fallout begins. Madeline watched from her apartment as Ryan's social media exploded. His followers turned on him. His so-called friends distanced themselves. His name, a once admired, once envied, became a warning. A scandal, a curse. For the first time, Ryan Parker wasn't in control. And Madeline? She had never felt stronger, but she should have known. Men like Ryan don't just lose, they strike back. And when he did, he made sure she felt it, the night everything changed. Madeline had just stepped out of the coffee shop when she saw him. Ryan, standing across the street, his eyes locked onto hers. His face was calm, expressionless, empty. But there was something behind his eyes, something dark, dangerous, desperate. Madeline's heart pounded. She knew what he was capable of. She had exposed him, and now she was his enemy. She turned to walk away, but then a car sped toward her, fast, too fast. Her instincts screamed. She jumped back, barely missing it. The car screeched past her, tires skidding on the pavement. People gasped. Someone shouted. And then, the car disappeared around the corner. Madeline's breath came in ragged gasps. That wasn't an accident. That was a message. She turned back toward Ryan, but he was gone. The war was now TM over. Madeline's hands shook. She had hurt him, humiliated him, exposed him. And now, he was coming for her. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about control, power, ownership. Ryan had lost everything. And now, he had nothing left to lose. That made him dangerous. That made him unpredictable. And Madeline, she wasn't sure she would survive what was coming next. Nowhere left to hide. The fear that never left. The car that almost hit her wasn't an accident. Madeline knew it. The timing, the speed, the way Ryan had been watching her just moments before. It was a warning, a message. You think you can ruin me? Watch what happens next. She should have been afraid. A few months ago, she would have been. But now she was furious. He could make her disappear. But if he wanted a war, she would give him one. The first attack. The next few days were a nightmare. Madeline's emails were hacked. Her bank account was frozen due to suspicious activity. She started getting blocked calls in the middle of the night. Sometimes they were silent, sometimes she heard breathing. Once, she heard a whisper. "You're making a mistake, Maddie." She slammed her laptop shut. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just revenge. This was psychological warfare. Ryan wasn't just trying to scare her. He was trying to break her. And the worst part? It was working. The moment she realized she wasn't safe. Madeline started looking over her shoulder. She started triple-checking her locks before bed. She started sleeping with a knife under her pillow. But deep down, she knew, it wouldn't be enough, because Ryan wasn't done with her yet. And she knew that sooner or later, he was coming back. She just didn't know when. Until one night, when she heard footsteps outside her window. Her breath froze in her throat. Slow, steady. Like someone was watching, waiting. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking. She turned on the flashlight and aimed it outside. Nothing, just darkness, but she felt it. She knew he was out there. watching, waiting, planning his next move, and Madeline. She had never been more terrified in her life. The breaking point. The next morning, she called Isabel. "Ryan's outside my apartment." Isabel's voice was sharp, urgent. "Did you call the police?" Madeline let out a bitter laugh. "And tell them what? That my ex is standing in the dark, staring at my window?" Silence, because they both knew the truth. Until Ryan physically hurt her, there was nothing they could do. And that was the most terrifying part, because they both knew it was only a matter of time. Ryan's next move. Later that day, Madeline got a message from an unknown number. She almost didn't open it, but something in her gut told her to. And when she did, her blood ran cold. It was a photo of her sitting alone in a coffee shop, taken from a distance. No words, no threats, just a reminder, a sick, twisted message. "I see you." Madeline felt sick. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But where? Because no matter where she went, Ryan would always find her. And now, she knew. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom anymore. She was fighting for her life. Nowhere left to run. The moment fear became reality. Madeline Carter had spent weeks living in fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what Ryan would do next. Fear that no matter how far she ran, no matter what she did, he would always find her. But that picture, the one of her sitting alone in a coffee shop, that wasn't just a message. That was a promise. A promise that she would never be free unless she did something about it. The attack she didn't see coming. Madeline spent the next few days on high alert. She took different routes home. She stayed inside after dark. She watched every shadow, every car, every stranger that passed by. But the thing about monsters like Ryan, they don't attack when you're watching. They attack when you least expect it. And one night, he finally made his move. It was late. Madeline was leaving work, her heart pounding as she stepped into the empty parking garage. She gripped her keys between her fingers, just in case, just like Isabel told her. But no amount of preparation could have saved her from what happened next, because as soon as she reached her car, a hand grabbed her from behind, cold, tight, unrelenting, and before she could even scream, everything went black, the trap she never saw coming. Madeline woke up somewhere unfamiliar, dark, cold. Her head throbbed, her wrists tied together. Panic exploded inside her. She tried to move, but she couldn't. Then she heard it. A voice, low, calm, familiar. "Maddie, Maddie, Maddie, why do you always make things so difficult?" Her blood ran cold. She didn't need to see him to know who it was. Ryan. She forced herself to breathe, to think. Don't let him see you're afraid. Don't give him the power. But that was hard to do. When the devil himself was standing in front of her, the man he always was. Ryan stepped closer, arms crossed, watching her, studying her, like she was some kind of puzzle he had been waiting to solve. "You should have just listened to me, Maddie," he said. "None of this had to happen." Madeline's hands curled into fists. "You did this to yourself, Ryan. You couldn't handle losing, so you..." Ryan laughed, like this was all one big joke. "Losing?" he echoed, shaking his head. "Maddie, I never lose." Her stomach twisted. "What do you want?" she whispered. Ryan crouched in front of her, tilting his head. "I want what's mine." Her heart stopped. "I was never yours, Ryan." His eyes darkened, and then now he reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, something that made Madeline's stomach drop. A wedding ring, her wedding ring, the one she had thrown away after he had destroyed her, and when Ryan spoke again, his words made her entire body go numb. "You don't get it, do you, Maddie?" he whispered. "You can expose me, you can run, you can fight all you want." He leaned in, his voice dangerously soft. "But at the end of the day, you will always be mine." Madeline's breath hitched, because in that moment she knew This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't just about control. Ryan Parker was never going to let her go unless she ended this first. And this time, she wasn't playing by his rules anymore. She was playing by hers, escape or die trying. The cage he built for her. The ropes around Madeline's wrists were tight, too tight. Every time she moved, the rough fibers bit into her skin. Her pulse pounded in her ears, her mind racing with one single thought. I have to get out of here. But Ryan was watching her, studying her, like a predator waiting for its prey to accept its fate. You don't look happy to see me, Maddie, he said, smirking. She clenched her jaw. Kidnapping isn't exactly romantic, Ryan. He sighed, pacing the room. See, that's your problem. You never appreciate the things I do for you. Madeline's stomach twisted. You call this love, she whispered. Ryan stopped. His eyes locked onto hers, and what she saw in them terrified her, because there was nothing there. No guilt, no remorse, just calm, like he truly believed he had done nothing wrong, like he believed she belonged to him. You don't get to leave me, Maddie, he said softly. Not now. Not ever. Her breath hitched. She knew, in that moment. Ryan wasn't just trying to scare her. He was never going to let her go, unless she made him. The only way out. Madeline forced herself to stay calm. To think Ryan had all the power right now. But she had one advantage. Ryan was arrogant. He thought he had already won. And that was his weakness. So she did something she never thought she'd do. She smiled. You're right, Ryan, she whispered. His eyes narrowed. What? Madeline forced herself to soften. Maybe I just needed to see it. Maybe I don't want to fight anymore. Ryan's posture shifted. He wanted to believe her. He wanted her to surrender, so she let him think she had. Untie me, Ryan, she murmured. Please. A flicker of hesitation. Then, he smirked. See, I knew you'd come around. And just like that, he started untying the ropes. Madeline didn't even hesitate. As soon as her hands were free, she grabbed the first thing she could reach and slammed it into his face. Ryan stumbled back, cursing. Blood dripped from his nose. Madeline ran. The chase. Her feet pounded against the floor. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She could hear Ryan right behind her. Too close. She threw open the door, but Ryan grabbed her arm, yanked her backward. She fought, kicked, clawed. She would not let him win. Stop fighting me, Maddie! Ryan roared. His grip tightened. Pain shot through her wrist, but she refused to give up. And then she saw it. A knife on the table. Her only chance. She lunged, grabbed it, and spun around. The blade pressed against Ryan's throat. His body froze. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. The moment he lost. Madeleine's chest heaved. Her hands shook, but she didn't back down. Let me go, Ryan, she whispered. His jaw clenched, but he let her go. She stepped back, knife still raised. If you ever come near me again, she said, voice shaking, I will kill you. Ryan's eyes darkened. You wouldn't. Madeline didn't blink. Try me. And this time, Ryan believed her. Because this wasn't the same girl he had manipulated. This wasn't the girl who had loved him blindly. This was a girl who had nothing left to lose. And Ryan Parker? He had just lost the only game he had ever played. The end of a nightmare. Madeline ran. This time, She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She didn't let the fear win, because she had won. And Ryan would never control her again. The aftermath of a nightmare. Running, but not hiding. Madeline didn't stop running. She didn't stop until she reached the police station. Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. Her body ached from the struggle. But for the first time in months, she felt free. She stepped inside, walked up to the desk, and said the words she had been too afraid to say before. I need to file a report. I was kidnapped. The officer looked up. By who? Madeline's voice was steady. Ryan Parker. And just like that, The hunt for him began. Ryan's final trick. The police took everything seriously. They asked for details, proof, everything. And Madeline, she gave them everything she had. The threats, the stalking, the moment he took her. But Ryan was one step ahead. Because before the police could find him, he found them first. And he played his best hand yet, the lie that could ruin everything. Madeline was called back to the station 2 days later. When she arrived, the officer's face was serious. "Madeline, Ryan has made a report against you." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "He's claiming that you attacked him, that you've been harassing him, spreading false accusations, and that you are the one stalking him." Madeline felt the world tilt. Ryan was flipping the story, making himself the victim. And the worst part? He had a bloody nose and bruises from their fight to prove it. "He's lying," she said, voice shaking. The officer nodded. "I believe you, but we need solid proof." And suddenly, Madeline realized, Ryan wasn't just dangerous, he was smart. And if she didn't fight back the right way, he would win, turning the tables for good. Madeline knew what she had to do. She couldn't just sit back and hope the truth came out. She had to expose him completely, so she went back to Isabel and the other girls he had used. They gathered every single piece of evidence. Texts, voicemails, witnesses who had seen him lurking outside her apartment. And then, they took it to the media. No more silence, no more fear. They wanted the world to know who Ryan Parker really was, and once they did, everything changed. The moment Ryan lost everything, it happened fast. The police started an official investigation. Reporters started covering the case. Social media exploded with women coming forward. Ryan lost his job. His friends turned on him. His entire life crumbled. And when the police finally arrested him for kidnapping, harassment, and fraud, Madeline stood outside the courthouse and watched him get dragged away. This time, he wasn't smirking. This time, he knew he had lost, because Madeline had won. For the first time, for the last time, for good. But was it really over? Ryan was gone, locked away. Madeline should have felt at peace, but deep down she knew guys like Ryan don't just disappear. And she had a terrible feeling that one day, somehow, he'd be back, haunted by the past. Freedom never felt this heavy. Ryan Parker was behind bars. Madeline should have felt free. She should have been able to breathe again, sleep again, live again. But the truth, she didn't. Because fear doesn't disappear overnight. Every time she walked home alone, she felt his eyes on her. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice. "You will always be mine." And that was a wound no court sentence could erase. Picking up the pieces, Madeline tried to rebuild. She moved to a new apartment. She started therapy. She even got a new job, one that didn't remind her of the places Ryan used to wait for her. Slowly, she started to feel normal again. She made new friends. She went on dates. She smiled, for real this time. And for the first time in a long, long time, she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had won. Until the day she got the phone call. The nightmare wasn't over. Madeline was making coffee when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But when she saw the caller ID, her stomach dropped. Unknown number. A familiar fear crawled up her spine. She hesitated. Then she picked up. "Hello?" Silence. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" And then a voice she never thought she'd hear again. "Miss me, Maddie?" Her blood ran cold. Ryan, she couldn't breathe. "You're supposed to be in jail," she whispered. Ryan chuckled. "Well, sweetheart, looks like I got out early." Madeline's world spun. This wasn't possible. This wasn't happening. "You're lying." "Check the news," Ryan murmured. Her hands shaking, she grabbed her laptop, typed his name into the search bar. And then her heart stopped. Ryan Parker released after early appeal win. Madeline felt sick. Ryan was free, he was out there, and now he was coming back for her. The chase begins again. Madeline hung up the phone. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her hands shook. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She had fought, she had won, she had escaped. But Ryan was never going to let her go, and this time she wasn't sure if she'd survive it, because the last time he wanted to own her. But now he wanted revenge. The monster returns, the panic that never left. Madeline Carter had spent months rebuilding her life, months convincing herself that Ryan Parker was gone forever, that she was safe, that she had won. But now he was back, and the moment she saw his name in the headlines, the moment she heard his voice on the phone, everything came crashing down, because men like Ryan never let go. And this time, he wasn't just playing mind games. He wanted revenge, the call that changed everything. Madeline's hands shook as she stared at her phone. Ryan's voice still echoed in her head. "Miss me, Maddie?" She felt sick. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But when she checked the news again, her worst nightmare was confirmed. Ryan had gotten out. And now, he was free to do whatever he wanted. Her blood ran cold. Because she knew Ryan Parker wasn't the type to forgive and forget. And if he had come back for her, that meant she had to end this before he did. The first warning. The next day, Madeline got a text. Unknown number. See you soon, beautiful. She dropped her phone. Her chest tightened. Her hands shook. This wasn't just a threat. This was a promise. She knew what Ryan wanted. He wanted her terrified. He wanted her to fall apart. But Madeline wasn't the same girl he had broken before. She was stronger now, smarter, angrier. And this time, she wasn't going to wait for him to strike first. She was going to end this herself, preparing for the final battle. Madeline called Isabel. Her voice was steady. Ryan is out. Silence. Then Isabel exhaled. I saw the news. Madeline's jaw tightened. I'm not running this time. Isabel's voice was sharp. Then what are you going to do? Madeline's grip tightened on her phone. Our team, I'm going to make sure he never comes back again. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. And she wasn't afraid of Ryan Parker anymore. She was ready for him, but Ryan had plans of his own. Madeline spent the next few days preparing. She changed her locks. She installed security cameras. She kept a knife under her pillow. But no amount of preparation could have prepared her for what happened next. Because Ryan was one step ahead, and when she came home one night, she found her apartment door slightly open. Her heart stopped. She had locked it. She was sure of it. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Slowly, carefully, she stepped inside. And what she saw made her blood run cold. On her kitchen table, there was a single red rose, and next to it, a note. Round 2, sweetheart. Madeline's breath shattered, because she knew her. Ryan wasn't just coming back. He was already here. The final game begins, the trap she never saw coming. Madeline Carter couldn't move. Her eyes locked on the red rose sitting on her kitchen table. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the note. Round 2, sweetheart. Her breath caught in her throat. Ryan had been inside her home, inside her safe place, and she hadn't even known. Her blood ran ice cold. Because if he could get in once, he could do it again. And next time, he wouldn't just leave a note. The fear she refused to feel. Madeline's hands shook as she grabbed her phone. She dialed 911, but before she could hit call out, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She hesitated, then answered. Ryan. A dark chuckle came through the line. Took you long enough. Her pulse raced. Where are you? She whispered. Silence. Then, everywhere, baby. Her stomach twisted. She turned, eyes scanning her apartment. Was he watching her right now? Her fingers clenched into a fist. "What do you want?" she asked, voice sharp. Ryan sighed. "Come on, Maddie. You already know the answer to that." Her jaw tightened. "Are you... not yours, Ryan?" His voice dropped, turning deadly. "Oh, sweetheart, that's where you're wrong." The call went dead, and that's when she heard it. A soft, slow knock on her door. Ryan was here. The last time she would ever be afraid. Madeline's blood roared in her ears. She stepped back, heart pounding. Another knock. Louder this time. She grabbed the knife from her kitchen counter. She wasn't running. Not this time. If Ryan wanted to end this, then she would end it first. She moved to the door, her breath shallow, shaking. And then she ripped it open. But the hallway was empty. Her stomach dropped. Because if Ryan wasn't at the door, then where was he? A soft breath sounded behind her. Her heart stopped, slowly. She turned, and standing inside her apartment was Ryan, smirking, watching, waiting. "Miss me?" Madeline's grip tightened on the knife. She had one chance to end this nightmare for good, and this time, she wasn't going to miss. The monster in her home. Madeline Carter had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The day she would come face to face with Ryan Parker one last time. The day she would end this nightmare forever. But now that he was here, standing in her apartment, smiling like he had already won, she realized something. Ryan was never afraid of consequences, because in his mind, he was unstoppable, untouchable, and the worst part, he truly believed it. "Miss me?" He smirked. Madeline's fingers tightened around the knife. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She forced herself to breathe, to think, because she knew if she made one wrong move, she wouldn't make it out alive. The trap. She had to escape. Ryan stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like a predator circling its prey. "You look nervous, sweetheart," he murmured. "Why so tense?" Madeline refused to let him see her fear. "How did you get in?" she asked, voice steady. Ryan chuckled. Maddie, you think I ever really left?" Her blood ran cold. "I changed my locks." Ryan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And I changed them back." Madeline's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about control. This was his final game, and she was the prize, the last lie he would ever tell. Ryan tilted his head. "Why do you keep running from me, Maddie?" He sighed. "Because you are a monster," she whispered. His jaw tightened. For the first time, the smirk disappeared. "That's not true." Madeline's fingers curled into a fist. "You kidnapped me. I was trying to make you see that we belong together. You stalked me. I was making sure you were safe." Madeline's chest ached with rage. "You hurt me, Ryan." A flicker of something dark crossed his face. Then, he smiled. "And yet here you are, still talking to me." Madeline's breath caught in her throat, because in his mind, she hadn't escaped. She had never escaped, and if she didn't stop him now, she never would. The fight that changed everything. Madeline struck first. She lunged forward, swinging the knife toward his chest. But Ryan, always quick, always in control, grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. The knife clattered to the floor. Madeline gasped in pain. Ryan grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the wall. "You just don't learn, do you?" he whispered. Her vision blurred. His grip tightened. "You were supposed to love me, Maddie," he hissed. "You were supposed to be mine." Madeline's lungs burned. She clawed at his hands, fought, kicked, struggled. But Ryan was stronger. And for just a moment, she thought, this was it. This was how it ended. Until she saw it. The lamp on the table. With every ounce of strength she had left, she reached for it and smashed it over his head. The glass shattered. Ryan stumbled back, cursing. Madeline gasped for air. She didn't stop to think. She grabbed the knife from the floor and drove it into his shoulder. Ryan screamed. Blood spilled onto the carpet. He fell to his knees, gripping the wound. And for the first time, he looked afraid. Madeline stood over him, chest heaving. She could end it now, right now, but she wasn't like him. She wasn't a monster. Instead, she grabbed her phone and called 911. "Send the police. I just stopped my stalker." Ryan's eyes darkened. "You think this is over?" he snarled. Madeline looked him dead in the eye. "No, Ryan, I know it is." The end of Ryan Parker. The police arrived minutes later. Ryan was arrested on the spot, charged with breaking and entering, stalking, harassment, and attempted murder. This time, there would be no early release and no second chances, no more games. Ryan Parker was finished. And Madeline Carter? She was finally free. The aftermath. A life worth living. It took time. Healing wasn't instant. There were nights she still woke up in a cold sweat, still flinched at unexpected noises, still carried the scars all inside and out. But one day she woke up and realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't Ryan's prisoner. She was Madeline Carter, and she had survived. She had won. And that was a victory no one could take from her. The final message. If there are one thing Madeline learned, it is this. DYH. Never ignore the red flags. Love should never feel like control. DYH. And the people who claim to love you the most can sometimes be the ones who destroy you. This was her story. This was her survival. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, DY. Remember Madeline. DY. Remember the price of a fake love. DY. And choose yourself before it becomes too late. The end. A life after Ryan. Or so she thought. Ryan Parker was gone. Locked away forever. Madeline Carter should have been free. But freedom was a strange thing. She had spent so long running, fighting, surviving, that she didn't know how to just live. She had escaped Ryan, but she hadn't yet escaped his ghost. Trying to move on. Madeline tried to rebuild herself. She moved into a new apartment, one with better security and no dark memories. She started therapy, learning to sleep without waking up in terror. She even began going out again, coffee shops, bookstores, places she once loved. And slowly, for the first time in years, she felt safe. She could finally breathe. Until the letter arrived. The letter that changed everything. It was a normal evening. Madeline was making tea when she heard the soft slip of an envelope under her door. She frowned. No one sent her letters. She picked it up. No name and no stamp. Just a plain white envelope. Her pulse quickened. Her stomach twisted. Slowly she opened it. There was only one sentence written inside. "You can never escape me." Madeline froze. Her breath shattered. Her hands shook. No. This had to be a joke. Ryan was locked up. He couldn't... Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her blood turned to ice. She almost didn't answer. But something in her gut told her to. She slowly pressed accept. And then... a voice she thought she'd never hear again. "Did you miss me?" Her entire world collapsed. The final horror. Madeline dropped the letter. She could barely breathe. "Ryan," she whispered. A soft chuckle came through the line. "Took you long enough to pick up, sweetheart." Madeline's heart slammed against her ribs. "You're in prison." Another chuckle. "Am I?" Madeline shook her head. "You can't touch me anymore." Ryan sighed. "That's cute, Maddie. You still think you've won?" Her fingers clenched. "Stay away from me." A pause. Then, in the softest, deadliest voice, "Look outside." Madeline's breath hitched. Number. No, this wasn't happening. Her hands trembled as she walked to the window. Her heart was racing, her chest tight with panic. Slowly, hesitantly, she pulled back the curtain, and her entire body turned to stone. Across the street, a man stood under the streetlight, watching her. Madeline's blood ran cold. He was too far to see clearly, but she didn't need to. She knew. Ryan Parker was free, and he had come back for her. The final choice. Madeline stepped back from the window, her breath shaking, her heart thundering. This wasn't over. Ryan had always been one step ahead, and now he was back, and she had one last choice to make. She could run, she could hide, she could live the rest of her life in fear, or dash. She could end this. For good. Madeline took a deep breath. Then she grabbed her phone and dialed the only person who could help her now. Isabel, he's back. A pause, then Isabel's voice, sharp as a knife. Then let's finish this. The end.